Let's give him a round of applause.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm putting this here with a timer on to give you the illusion I'm going to be short this evening. I had a friend who told me that sometime soon, sometime in my life, I'll get a chance to speak to people before they eat. And what she told me was that when you have that, when you get a chance to do that, you have an obligation. You have an obligation to be profound because you're taking their time before they eat. And she said, but Sudip, you're probably not going to be profound. And so then she said, but if you can't be profound, then you can be informative. Give them something to think about, something to chew on, something to really get their brain working while they enjoy the company of the people around them. But then she said, Sudip, if you can't be profound and you can't be informative, then for God's sakes, be brief. And I have learned to take that advice very well. This evening, I'm going to try and be relatively brief and hopefully informative. First of all, just thank you all. Thank you for the privilege of joining you this evening. Thank you to Ron. Thank you to Judy. Thank you to all of you members of the Washington Academy of Sciences. It is a privilege to be here. Talking about the history of our organizations is something that I really like to do. The Washington Academy was created in 1898, and the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the organization that I get to lead, was created in 1848. The National Academy of Sciences was created in 1862 during the Civil War. Our organizations share a lot of people at the founding, right? The Alexander Graham Bell played a role in the founding of the Washington Academy of Sciences. Alexander Graham Bell also was the second person to give money to support the founding of Science Magazine, the journal Science, that I have the privilege of being the executive publisher of. The first was Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison was kind of the Elon Musk of his day, in all the same ways, for good and ill. And he was worried about the fact that the light bulb wasn't quite working, and so he wanted to have a distraction. And so he gave $10,000 to create Science Magazine to talk about the wonders of electricity before it existed in any big scale. And if you look at the first pages of Science Magazine, it's kind of a rag. It's kind of snake oil. There's not great science in it. And what happens over time is that you realize that Science Magazine becomes this mouthpiece for European science, where we start publishing things about X-rays in the 1890s, and that's when it starts to become a real scientific journal. And that sort of trend line, that sort of a history, that through line, is I think similar to the AAAS, it's similar to the National Academies, it's similar to the Washington Academy of Sciences. We have been in this through line throughout the history of this country, and it is a remarkable history. It's one that we should all be proud of. And I've spent the last 5 years, as I've led the AAAS, talking about that role in history and the role of science in that history, going all the way back to the founding fathers. Everyone asks me, who would you want to have dinner with sometime? Benjamin Franklin is my answer to that every time, because he sits at this nexus of science and politics and philosophy. That is the kind of tradition that we are the inheritors of. We, the scientists, the engineers, the folks who are in this room, we're the keepers of that flame. And so that's why it's so important, I think, for us to be thinking about science and policy in this moment in history. And so let me just talk about that for a second. So when I take stock of where we are in the world, and I stop looking at the paper for a second, and I only look at the research part of Science Magazine, here's what I see. I see a world in which we are aware that there are 2-mile-high mountains of ice on Pluto, and that they're covered with methane dust. The fact that we humans know that blows me away. It is an impossibility that we know that we actually know that exists. It is extraordinary to me that thanks to the folks at NIST, and I know we have a NIST table here, thanks to the folks at NIST, we know we can measure time down to the picosecond. And maybe it's even farther down now, I don't even know. I had a chance to visit the folks out in Boulder who do that work. The fact that we can actually realize the universes of time that are taking place in every second that passes by is extraordinary to me. We humans can do that. We live in a time when I've met a grandmother who has cystic fibrosis. Now, the reason why I tell you that is because if you have cystic fibrosis, you should have died when you were 15 to 30, somewhere in that range. The fact that there's a grandmother with cystic fibrosis is a miracle. It's a miracle created by science. It's a miracle created by science and engineering. And it's remarkable. And it comes from the work that made that happen was because of the Genome Project. But before that even, we now have, I've met actually a young lady who's a mother down in the Mississippi Delta who has gone 5 years without a blood transfusion, and she has sickle cell anemia. And that, again, is a miracle. Because if you know anyone who has sickle cell anemia, you know that it's an incredibly painful condition that can put you into bed for days at a time and get you into the hospital. But the fact that there is a gene editing technology that has made it to where she is cured of sickle cell anemia is a miracle. We live in a time like that. What a wonder. What an absolute wonder to live in a moment in history like that. When I think about that gene editing technology, I think about the fact that it all flows from these scientists that were looking at bacteria in the late 80s and early 90s. And they noticed in their very primitive sequencing techniques that DNA repeated over and over again in that bacteria. And they thought that was interesting. That was a cool curiosity. And if you had asked those scientists back then, what good is this? They would have said something like, well, it's curious. Or they would have said, well, we might make better yogurt out of it. That's what they would have said, because they would have had no idea that 20 years later, we would have realized that those repeats were actually a hallmark of a protection system for bacteria that could be harnessed and turned into a gene editing technology that someday would cure sickle cell anemia. What a world we live in, that that's possible. What an extraordinary time in history. Sometimes there are times in your life when you say, gosh, I wish I could have lived in an interesting time in history. Maybe the time when, the time of the Roman Empire or I don't know, the beginnings of the end of World War II. I can't, as I think through the eras in history of science, and I think through the time in the 1600s when Isaac Newton discovered, or I guess this is discovered, he discovered the laws of nature. Or in 1905 when Einstein has further refined and discovered those laws of nature. I would love to spend time in those eras, but frankly, this is the golden era of science. We're living in it right now. What an extraordinary time to be alive. And so I take that stock, I take that through line all the way from the history of our nation and also the history of science, and I look at where we are today. And all these things that are possible, all of them that have happened, are because of the greatest engine of innovation and energy for good that the world has ever known. And that is this scientific enterprise that we've built. It has scientists and engineers and technologists. But in the United States, it's even broader than that. The thing that really made it powerful over time is the fact that, yes, we have academia, and we have government, and we have industry. We also have venture capital, and we have the ability to match up dollars with risk tolerances. We have this amazing entrepreneur culture that allows us to take risks and fail, and then continue again. We have this idea that if we apply ourselves in engineering or in technology, that we'll get somewhere with it, and that there's an imagination of what might come. That's an extraordinary thing, and it's an enterprise that frankly is the greatest innovation it's the greatest engine for innovation that I truly believe the world has ever known. And that's why it's striking to me that we also live in this moment in time. And this is, you should never mistake the smile on my face or the joke that I tell for me not being angry about the moment that we're in. We are in an incredible time, one where that engine of innovation, that engine of greater prosperity and greater health is at risk. And it worries me. And so I want to talk just a little bit about that tonight because I think it's important to do so. We are, if someone asked me today, what is it that I'm excited about in science? I can tell you that there are, in the same way that sickle cell anemia can be cured by gene editing, there are actually 600 rare diseases that can be cured by gene editing. Now we got to figure out how to do that at scale and how to do it in a cost-effective way, but we can do it. It's just, and I'm gonna insult every engineer in the room. It's just engineering. Guru wrote a book about wicked problems, so we can figure out these wicked problems. I'll insult the scientists too in just a second, so don't worry. Now, when I think of that, I think that's exciting. When I think of the fact that we really will have heavy lift capability to low Earth orbit, that's remarkable. The number of launches that have taken place this year alone in the world is extraordinary, and it's happening in the United States. It's happening thanks to SpaceX and other commercial providers. It's happening thanks to NASA. It's happening thanks to commercial providers in China and Europe, and also national governments around the world. That is an amazing time to be alive, because when you can launch things for less money, it turns out you can put really cool things up into space. That is an extraordinary thing that's going to be coming. But all that is predicated on this ecosystem remaining strong. And we call it an ecosystem because it has all these pieces to it. And I have to tell you, I spent the time from August through January working with a group of 70 people from around the country, from all different sectors. Now get this, on this group I had Nobel Prize winners. So Jennifer Doudna, who won the Nobel Prize for gene editing, was on this task force. But so was the Speaker of the House of West Virginia. Now, the Speaker of the House of, and if you don't know West Virginia politics, let me just tell you a little bit about it. The House of Representatives, the House of Delegates in West Virginia has 91 Republicans and 9 Democrats. And the Speaker of the House is a guy that I've really gotten to know. His name is Roger Hanshaw, and he's a chemist. He's a chemist, and I said, I want you to join this task force. I really want you to be a part of this. I also asked a state senator from New Jersey, the guy who represents Princeton, and is about as different politically from Roger as you could possibly be, and I asked him to be a part of this task force. In addition to Jennifer Doudna, in addition to folks like Keith Yamamoto at the University of California, San Francisco. I also asked a few billionaires, guys like David Siegel, who do Two Sigma, who are entrepreneurs, and who have really invested in technology in this country and have helped bring products to market. Guys like John Reed, who's the senior R&D leader at Johnson & Johnson. Pulled these folks together. Oh, and actually, in a through line all the way through, asked Sam Kulkarni, who's the CEO of CRISPR Therapeutics, which is the company that created that sickle cell anemia drug that I told you about. These folks all together, and we tried to work through what is the vision for American science and technology. Now, this is back in August, which feels like a million years ago. And what we realized is that there was so much common ground that we had, regardless of where in the country, and this thing was from people were from everywhere, whether from Louisiana or from Oregon. We found ways to figure out that there are things we have in common. And the thing we have most in common is that we want a vision for the future. We want to see a way of building up this enterprise so that it is strong for our children and strong for our grandchildren, and delivering progress for humanity, particularly for the United States. And when we did that, first of all, we drew upon Vannevar Bush. Now, in some rooms I don't say Vannevar Bush because I don't know who he is. In this room, I feel very comfortable that you all are very aware of who he was. Now, I sometimes get myself into trouble because I say, I love Vannevar Bush, I love Endless Frontier, but frankly, I want to stop talking about it. Because that was 80 years ago almost. 80 years ago. And that's wonderful. And we have built extraordinary things. But frankly, if Vannevar Bush were here today, he'd be amazed at what we've created, because it's way beyond his imagination. And that's fantastic, right? Because, he talked to, his simple, powerful idea, profound idea, was that you can invest in science in a time of peace, just like you can in a time of war. And that you will get progress because of it. That was a profound idea. The second profound idea is that we would do teaching and research at the same time, and that the government would fund research at institutions of higher learning. Profound ideas. But well beyond that, he never imagined a world in which the United States government would invest $200 billion a year in science, and the private industry would invest almost $800 billion. That's where we are today. private industry, philanthropy, and various sources of capital invest almost $800 billion a year. So the country itself invests almost $1 trillion a year in science and technology. That's something he never imagined. He always thought the infrastructure would be the national laboratories. That that's where the big infrastructure would be. But we know, from driving, not driving here, but driving in Loudoun County, we know that infrastructure, a lot of it sits in private industry, right? Data centers, GPUs, these aren't being built at Oak Ridge and Los Alamos. They're being built by private companies. So we live in an extraordinary time. We have to build on top of that. And so when I pulled this group together, we said, what does that world need to look like for the American enterprise to continue to be the best in the world? And it has pieces that are being incorporated right now. And so I had a chance to meet with Michael Kratsios, who's the new science advisor to President Trump. And he's got ideas, some of which are the ones that are in that document that we produced. One of them is to make permanent the R&D tax credit. It's a powerful idea, a really important idea in my opinion, and something that needs to be done. Not to tax small business grants, SBIR grants, as revenue, because when you're a small business and you get a grant from the government, the last thing you need to do is then have that be taxed as revenue, because you don't have revenue yet. To ensure that there's an advanced manufacturing tax credit, things like that really are ideas that this administration is trying to include in the big, beautiful bill that I keep hearing about. But then, there's also damage being done. And this is the part that I really am feeling some anger about. And I try to channel that anger. I will always channel my anger into something constructive. But we are taking this enterprise and we're turning off the heat and the light. The heat and the light, right? An ecosystem needs heat and light. Now there's all kinds of stuff that ends up growing on top of it. But if you don't have heat and light, eventually it dies, because there's no seed corn. Boy, am I mixing some metaphors. And so you end up with this thing that slowly shrivels from inside. And so when I think of what's being done to agencies like NIST, to agencies like the National Science Foundation, agencies like the National Institutes of Health, I am incredibly disappointed, first of all. I talked to a woman today who has stage 4 metastatic cancer. And she was just fortunate enough to be enrolled in a clinical trial at the National Institutes of Health in the clinical center. And it was supposed to start within 2 weeks, because at stage 4 malignant cancer, you want to get started. And that's been put off and delayed indefinitely. And when I see that being done for a clinical trial here in Bethesda, Maryland, right? I mean, that doesn't just bother me for the obvious reason, which is that this woman is going through hell right now, and that this is research is hope. But it also bothers me because immunotherapies have actually turned into a chronic disease many forms of cancer. And if we can actually pivot them to work on new forms of cancer, we're going to lengthen the lives of people. They're going to add to our economy. That economy will also be built because there are products that we will sell around the world. This is the great power of our enterprise. It is the great power of what this nation can accomplish. And we are in the midst of turning it off just midstream. And I'm not going to let that happen. And I know none of you all are, because this is not a partisan issue. It's, in some ways, some of this is collateral damage. And part of what we have to do is just make sure that we understand what it is we're doing. We're doing active decision making. And so I testified to Congress last week. I was the only bipartisan witness at a Senate Appropriations Committee hearing. And the key message to deliver was that there is great promise, there's great opportunity, but we are at a crossroads. We're at a crossroads of determining what the future is going to look like. Now, one path leads to those opportunities that I talked about. The opportunity to go to space, the opportunity to cure disease, the opportunity to grow our economy. The other path is a path where we take what's there and we continue to harvest what we've already discovered, harvest what we've already put into the discovery pipeline, but that we turn off that greatest engine of discovery. And sometimes people say to me, no, it's just the political stuff. But when you're talking about budgets like I've seen that have been proposed, I'm sorry, you can't cut the NIST budget by a quarter. by 25% and not cut really important things. You can't cut the National Science Foundation budget by 55% and not cut great things. You know, I sometimes looked, you know, going to Egypt and seeing the pyramids, and you realize that, you know, we don't build pyramids in this country. Our pyramids are the Apollo program, the space station, the Genome Project. Those are our pyramids. And we don't do them for a pharaoh. We do them for the benefit of the United States and the benefit of humanity. It's an extraordinary thing. But I remember going to Egypt and I remember seeing some half-finished pyramids. Half-finished pyramids. I remember thinking, why? Why are there half-finished pyramids? And this year is when it dawned on me. It's when it dawned on me that half-finished pyramids are the physical manifestation of the lack of will. The lack of will of a society. And we don't want that. I don't want to leave half-filled pyramids. And I can tell you that right now we have foundations for two 30-meter telescopes. Two 30-meter telescopes that will open up our eyes to the universe in a way we've never done before. That could actually allow us to see extrasolar planets. Now some might say, well gosh, what's the good in that? What's the good in that? Well, you know, Michael Faraday was asked that once. Michael Faraday was asked, what good are these electrons that you're studying? And his answer was something apocryphal that I love. He said, I don't know, but someday you're going to tax it. Someday you're going to tax it. And I believe that. We still live in a time when there's magic to be found. We know the standard model's not right. We know that there's magic still to be found out there in science and technology. There are miracles still to be found in science and technology. And so we've got to make sure that the country understands that. And so the reason why I came tonight, and it's partly because of the wonderful invitation from Ram and from Judy, but it's also because I know the Washington Academy of Sciences has dedicated itself, through good times and bad, to inspire the next generation of scientists. That is the reason I came tonight, because you all have put your energy into it. You put your energy and your heart and soul into it, and that is something that I value. I value more than the friendship of Nobel Prize winners. I value more than the friendship of senators like I met earlier this morning. I value the energy that you all put into that, because that is the key. That is the key to ensuring that we don't have unfinished pyramids. That is the key to ensure that we don't leave things on the table, opportunities on the table. I don't want to do that. I know you all don't either. And I know that the kids that you're inspiring don't either. Either, whatever. And so here we stand. Here we stand at a moment where there's two roads in front of us. And I'm often telling people that, you know, don't get angry. Don't get, you know, because there are people on all parts of the political spectrum that understand this. I know it because I've spent my time, if you look at my bio, I am a Republican staffer on the Senate side. There are people of all cultures, all faiths, all backgrounds that believe in the power of this enterprise. And so the thing that I'd ask you to do is to ensure that you keep doing the work of inspiring that next generation, that we reach out to our elected officials. Even if they're on the right side of things, they still need some backing up, so make sure they get that. And then the thing we have to do is ensure, and I'm trying to do this from my position at AAAS, is to ensure that we are telling that story in Congress in a way that's never been told before. One that enables us to become the protagonists of our own story again. I'm tired of being on a back foot. We've got to be the protagonists of our own story again. We've got to do it with our partners in the patient advocacy community, our partners in industry, our partners in government. And I see that coming together. And I'll tell you, last week I saw some glimmers of hope. I saw a few glimmers of hope last week. The members of the Appropriations Committee said some of the right things. I got taken for a ride by Senator John Kennedy, but other than that, the senators really did have, I think they had the right idea. And so I see those glimmers of hope. It's going to be tough, and this enterprise is going to be different a year from now than it was a year before. But that doesn't mean it can't still be the greatest engine of innovation and advancement that the world's ever seen. So thank you for what you do, and I'm so proud to be with you this evening. Thank you.
Very inspirational talk.